The mining drills hummed their familiar tune across the orange plains of Taro 7 as Tom wiped sweat from his forehead. The planet had always been predictable with its warm days and mild nights, making it perfect for the multi-species mining operation that had been running smoothly for 3 years. Workers from 4 different worlds labored side by side, each bringing their unique strengths to extract the valuable minerals buried deep beneath the surface. Tom adjusted his safety helmet and watched his teammates work around the massive excavation site. The Chitauri moved with precise coordination, their 6 arms allowing them to operate multiple tools simultaneously while their compound eyes tracked every detail. Their exoskeletons gleamed in the double suns, and their communication came through rapid clicking sounds that the universal translators converted into understandable speech. Near the processing station, the Quen supervisor Ripple coordinated shipments with fluid grace, her blue-green skin glistening as she moved between different work areas. The Aquan could work longer shifts than most species, their amphibious nature giving them endurance that impressed everyone. At the heavy machinery section, Boulder directed the massive earth movers with patient precision. The Rockburn foreman stood nearly 3 meters tall, his crystalline body structure making him nearly indestructible around the dangerous equipment. His species communicated through harmonic vibrations that resonated through solid materials, creating an almost musical quality to their conversations. Tom had grown to appreciate working with such diverse colleagues over the past 18 months. Each species brought something valuable to the operation, and the humans served as versatile coordinators who could adapt to working with anyone. The mining consortium had chosen this combination carefully, knowing that diversity led to better problem-solving and increased efficiency. The first sign of trouble came during the evening shift change. Tom noticed the temperature gauge on his wrist display showing readings 5 degrees lower than normal. He mentioned it to Dave, another human engineer, who shrugged and suggested the sensors might need calibration. The weather on Taro 7 rarely varied more than a few degrees, so neither man gave it much thought. By the next morning, the temperature had dropped another 10 degrees. Tom needed to wear his light jacket for the first time since arriving on the planet. The change was noticeable but not concerning for humans, who were accustomed to much more dramatic temperature variations on their homeworlds. However, the alien workers began showing signs of distress that Tom had never witnessed before. The Chitauri moved more slowly, their normally rapid gestures becoming sluggish and deliberate. Several workers had stopped their tasks entirely and clustered together in small groups, sharing body heat. Their clicking communications became less frequent and took on a different tone that the translators labeled as distress signals. Queen Zara, the Chitauri leader, called for an emergency meeting of the work supervisors. Ripple appeared at the meeting with her skin showing patches of darker coloration that Tom had learned indicated stress in her species. She moved with less of her usual fluid grace, and her breathing seemed labored. When she spoke, her words came more slowly than normal, and she frequently paused as if gathering energy to continue. Boulder arrived last, his massive form moving with unusual deliberation. The harmonic vibrations that normally accompanied his communication had changed to lower frequencies that seemed to require more effort to produce. His crystalline structure, usually clear and bright, had taken on a cloudy appearance that Tom found troubling. The meeting revealed the scope of the crisis. Developing on Taro 7, the planet's atmospheric processors, designed to maintain stable weather patterns, had malfunctioned due to unusual solar activity from the binary star system. The backup systems were struggling to compensate, and the temperature was projected to continue dropping for at least another week before stabilizing at levels 15 to 20 degrees below normal. For humans, this represented an inconvenience, requiring warmer clothing and adjusted work schedules. For the other species, it meant potential disaster. The Chitauri biology required consistent warmth to maintain their metabolic processes, and prolonged cold could force them into hibernation states that might last for months. The Aquen needed specific temperature ranges to regulate their complex circulatory systems, and the cold was already affecting their cognitive functions. The Rockburn, despite their sturdy appearance, relied on thermal energy to maintain the molecular bonds in their crystalline structure. An extreme cold could cause permanent damage to their bodies. Emergency protocols activated across the mining station. The medical bay prepared to treat hypothermia cases in 3 different alien physiologies. Supply requests went out for emergency heating equipment, but the nearest supply station was 4 days away by the fastest transport available. The communications center worked frantically to arrange emergency evacuation procedures, though removing workers in hibernation or weakened states posed significant risks. Tom watched his colleagues struggle with growing concern. During his lunch break, he walked through the residential areas and saw Chitauri workers sealing themselves into their quarters, preparing for emergency hibernation. The Akin had gathered in the communal pools, trying to share whatever warmth the heated water could provide. The rockburn moved so slowly through the corridors that normal conversations became impossible. The human quarters buzzed with activity as people shared extra clothing and discussed ways to help their alien colleagues. Someone suggested setting up space heaters in the work areas, but the power grid couldn't handle the additional load without shutting down essential mining operations. Others proposed working double shifts to cover for the affected workers, but that would only delay the inevitable if the cold continued to worsen. As evening approached and the temperature dropped another 3 degrees, Tom realized that conventional solutions wouldn't be enough. The heating systems were already running at maximum capacity, and the emergency equipment wouldn't arrive in time to prevent serious casualties. He needed to think differently about the problem, using the resources immediately available rather than waiting for outside help. Standing on the observation deck overlooking the mining site, Tom studied the alien landscape with new eyes. The orange plains stretched toward distant hills covered with unusual vegetation that had evolved to survive in this world's unique conditions. Crystalline formations caught the fading light of the twin suns, and strange fungal growths dotted the areas near geothermal vents. Everything he needed might already be here, waiting for someone to recognize its potential. Dawn broke over Taro 7 with frost covering the mining equipment for the first time in recorded history. Tom stepped outside the human quarters and felt the sharp bite of air that made him pull his jacket tighter. The temperature had dropped another 8 degrees overnight, and the atmospheric processors showed no signs of recovering from their malfunction. The crisis had deepened dramatically during the night hours. Tom walked toward the central plaza and found scenes that would have been unimaginable just days earlier. Chitauri workers had begun constructing cocoon-like structures using metallic sheeting and insulation foam from the emergency supplies. Their movements had become so slow that simple tasks took 3 times longer than normal, and many had stopped working entirely to conserve energy for survival. Queen Zara had sealed herself into the largest emergency shelter, surrounded by temperature regulation equipment that drew massive amounts of power from the station's grid. Through the viewing window, Tom could see her curled into a tight ball, her exoskeleton having taken on a dull gray color that indicated the onset of hibernation. The medical team estimated she would remain in this state for at least 6 weeks, possibly longer if the cold persisted. The Aquan situation had become equally desperate. Ripple struggled to coordinate the remaining workers from the heated pool area, but her cognitive functions continued to decline as her body temperature dropped. The Aquan had evolved in warm oceans, and their complex nervous systems required specific thermal conditions to operate efficiently. Several workers had already slipped into semi-conscious states, floating motionless in the communal pools while their colleagues tried to maintain the water temperature with portable heaters. Dr. Flo, the Aquan medical officer, moved through the pool areas checking on her patients with obvious difficulty. Her normally bright blue-green skin had faded to pale gray, and her movements lacked the fluid coordination that characterized her species. She communicated through the translator that the Aquan workers were entering a dangerous metabolic slowdown that could become irreversible if not corrected within days. The rockburn faced a different but equally serious threat. Boulder had positioned himself near the largest geothermal vent, but even the natural heat source couldn't fully compensate for the atmospheric temperature drop. His crystalline structure showed hairline cracks that appeared overnight, indicating that the molecular bonds holding his body together were weakening under thermal stress. Other rockburn workers had gathered around smaller heat sources throughout the mining complex, but their numbers were limited and not everyone could access adequate warmth. The youngest workers showed the most severe effects, their less developed crystal matrices proving more vulnerable to temperature fluctuations. Several had already been placed in emergency stasis pods to prevent permanent structural damage. The mining operation had effectively shut down. Essential systems still functioned, but production ceased entirely as workers focused on survival rather than productivity. The communications center worked around the clock to coordinate emergency responses, but the nearest rescue ships were still 3 days away, and the specialized equipment needed for alien hypothermia treatment was in even shorter supply. Tom spent the morning touring the facility with increasing alarm. In the Chitauri residential area, entire families had sealed themselves into hibernation clusters. The younger Chitauri made clicking sounds of distress that the translators couldn't properly interpret, suggesting their communication had shifted to frequencies beyond the normal range. Emergency heating units ran continuously, but the power demands were unsustainable for more than a few more days. The engineering section had become a refuge for those workers still able to function. Human technicians worked alongside the few remaining mobile aliens to maintain critical systems and monitor the life support equipment, keeping their colleagues alive. The atmosphere was tense with the knowledge that conventional solutions were insufficient for the scale of the crisis. During an emergency staff meeting, the harsh reality became clear. The evacuation transports could handle the human personnel and a limited number of aliens in stable condition, but moving hibernating Chitauri or critically hypothermic Aquan posed extreme risks that could prove fatal. The rockburn were too heavy for standard transport without specialized equipment that would take weeks to arrange. Ripple attended the meeting with obvious effort. Her words slurred and her responses delayed as the cold continued to affect her neural pathways. She reported that half the Aquan workforce was now unconscious, and the others were rapidly approaching the same state. The heated pools provided temporary relief, but the portable heating units were failing under the constant demand, and replacement parts were not available. Boulder's communication had become so slow that each statement took several minutes to complete. His harmonic vibrations had shifted to barely audible frequencies, and the cracks in his crystalline structure had spread visibly since the morning. The rockburn medical specialist estimated that permanent damage would begin within 48 hours if the temperature continued to drop. The human workers found themselves in the unprecedented position of being the only fully functional group on the station. Their evolutionary history of surviving ice ages and adapting to diverse climates had prepared them for conditions that proved catastrophic for their alien colleagues. While they felt the cold, they remained capable of complex thought and coordinated action. Dave organized teams to monitor the life support systems for the hibernating workers. Lisa coordinated food and water distribution for those still conscious. Mark worked with the communications center to update evacuation plans and request additional emergency supplies. Each human took responsibility for multiple alien colleagues, checking on their condition and adjusting heating equipment as needed. Tom found himself drawn repeatedly to the observation deck, studying the landscape with growing determination. The conventional approaches were failing, and time was running out for thousands of alien workers who had become his friends and colleagues over the past months. The emergency supplies would last perhaps 2 more days. The power grid was severely strained, and the rescue ships carried equipment designed for human emergencies rather than multi-species catastrophes. Standing in the cold air that barely bothered him while his alien friends suffered in crisis, Tom realized that the solution wouldn't come from off-world rescue or advanced technology. The planet itself held resources that millions of years of evolution had adapted for thermal regulation and survival. Plants that thrived near geothermal areas, crystalline formations that focused and reflected heat, and fungal growths that insulated themselves against temperature variations. Everything needed to save his colleagues was already here on Taros 7. waiting for someone with the right combination of knowledge and desperation to recognize its potential. Tom left the observation deck with purpose burning in his chest and walked directly to the Geological Survey Station. The research databases contained detailed information about every plant, mineral, and formation within 50 kilometers of the mining site. He had studied some of this data during his initial assignment briefing, but now he examined it with desperate focus, looking for thermal properties and insulation characteristics rather than mining potential. The breakthrough came when he found Dr. Reed's botanical survey from 2 years earlier. The report described a species of fungal growth called thermal mushrooms that clustered around geothermal vents throughout the region. These organisms had evolved hollow, air-filled stems that provided excellent insulation against temperature fluctuations. The survey noted that the fungi could maintain internal temperatures 15 degrees warmer than the surrounding environment through their specialized cellular structure. Tom pulled up additional files and discovered that the crystalline formations dotting the landscape contained trace amounts of metallic compounds that created highly reflective surfaces. These crystals had formed over centuries of exposure to the binary star system and possessed the ability to capture, focus, and redirect thermal energy with remarkable efficiency. The geology team had dismissed them as mining obstacles, but Tom saw them as natural heat management systems. Further research revealed a fibrous plant species growing in the mineral-rich soil near active thermal vents. These plants had developed dense, layered cellular structures that trapped warm air and resisted heat loss. The xenobotany reports indicated they maintained surface temperatures up to 20 degrees above ambient air temperature through biological thermal regulation mechanisms. Tom gathered his findings and approached Dave, who was monitoring the power grid in the engineering section. Together, they downloaded detailed maps showing the locations of these natural resources within walking distance of the mining station. The thermal mushrooms grew in clusters just 2 kilometers from the main facility, while the reflective crystals formed natural deposits along the ridgelines visible from the observation deck. Their first expedition began before dawn, with Tom and Dave carrying collection bags and basic tools toward the nearest thermal mushroom colony. The fungi proved easy to harvest, growing in abundant clusters around every geothermal vent. Tom carefully cut sections of the hollow stems, marveling at their lightweight construction and efficient insulation properties. The internal air chambers created a natural barrier against heat loss while remaining flexible enough to work with. Dave focused on collecting the reflective crystals, which broke away from their formations in flat, mirror-like pieces, perfect for creating heat-directing surfaces. The crystals were surprisingly lightweight despite their metallic appearance, and they reflected not only visible light but also infrared radiation with impressive efficiency. Tom realized these could be sewn into garment linings to create wearable heat retention systems. The fibrous plants near the thermal vents required more effort to harvest, but their dense, fuzzy texture immediately suggested their insulation potential. Tom tested small samples by wrapping them around his thermometer and watching the temperature readings stabilize at levels several degrees above the ambient air temperature. The plant fibers were naturally water-resistant and maintained their insulating properties even when compressed. Back at the station, Tom commandeered an unused storage room and began experimenting with different combinations of materials. He started with simple layered designs, placing thermal mushroom stems between outer layers of plant fiber and incorporating crystal fragments as reflective elements. His first prototype resembled a crude vest, but thermal testing showed it could maintain internal temperatures 12 degrees above ambient. Word of Tom's project spread quickly through the human quarters. Lisa, who had worked in textile manufacturing before joining the mining operation, offered her expertise in creating more sophisticated designs. Mark contributed his knowledge of materials science, suggesting ways to maximize thermal efficiency while maintaining flexibility and durability. Dave worked on developing assembly techniques that could be taught to other workers for mass production. The breakthrough came when Tom decided to test his prototype on a living subject. Ripple had deteriorated significantly overnight. Her skin, now showing the pale gray coloration that indicated critical hypothermia in aquan physiology. Dr. Flo had placed her in emergency care, but the available heating equipment was insufficient to reverse her condition. Tom approached Dr. Flo with his experimental jacket, explaining the materials and thermal properties, while acknowledging the risks of testing unproven equipment on a critically ill patient. The Aquan medical officer examined the garment with her remaining cognitive capacity and agreed that conventional treatment was failing. With careful monitoring, they fitted the jacket around Ripple's torso and waited. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Within 30 minutes, Ripple's skin began showing patches of healthier blue-green coloration. After 2 hours, her breathing became more regular and her responses to questions showed improved cognitive function. By the end of 4 hours, she was sitting upright and speaking in complete sentences. Though still weak from her ordeal, the success with Ripple proved the concept, but Tom realized that each species would require different design modifications. The Chitauri needed jackets that accommodated their 6-armed body structure and provided thermal protection for their vulnerable joint areas. The Rockburn required garments that could distribute heat evenly across their crystalline surfaces while allowing for their unique, harmonic communication methods. Lisa organized a production team of human volunteers who worked around the clock to create species-specific designs. The Chitauri jackets used flexible thermal mushroom strips that could bend with their complex body movements while providing complete coverage. The Rockburn versions incorporated larger crystal sections that not only retained heat but also enhanced their natural harmonic resonance capabilities. Tom established collection teams that ventured out each day to gather more raw materials from the planet's natural thermal management systems. The thermal mushroom colonies proved sustainable, regrowing quickly after harvesting. The crystal formations provided abundant material without depleting the visible deposits. The fibrous plants actually seemed to benefit from selective harvesting, growing back denser and more insulating than before. The human workers discovered they had an unexpected advantage in this crisis: their evolutionary background of surviving diverse climates and developing clothing technologies made them natural experts in thermal management and garment construction. Skills that seemed routine to humans proved revolutionary when applied to alien physiology and available materials. Production reached full capacity when Tom developed simplified assembly techniques that could be taught quickly to workers with basic manual dexterity. The process became an assembly line with humans cutting and preparing materials while teaching the techniques to any alien workers still capable of fine motor control. The workshop buzzed with activity as species barriers dissolved in the face of shared survival needs. Each completed jacket represented hope for another life saved and another worker who could return to helping others. Tom watched the first Chitauri workers emerge from their emergency hibernation after receiving thermal protection, their movements returning to normal speed as their body temperatures stabilized. The sight of alien colleagues working alongside humans to save their own species filled him with pride in what cooperation and ingenuity could accomplish. The crisis was far from over, but for the first time since the temperature began dropping, Tom felt confident that they would not lose anyone to the cold. News of the successful jacket design spread through the mining station like wildfire. Tom found himself surrounded by desperate alien workers and their families, all seeking the thermal protection that could save their lives. The single storage room workshop had become inadequate for the scale of production needed to supply jackets for over 3,000 alien workers across the facility. Ripple, now recovered enough to move around with assistance, became Tom's first alien ally in expanding the operation. Her experience with logistics coordination proved invaluable as she helped organize collection teams and distribution networks. Despite her ongoing recovery, she insisted on contributing to the effort that had saved her life, working with Tom to identify the most critically affected workers who needed jackets first. The Aquan supervisor used her knowledge of the facility's layout to establish multiple collection points for raw materials. She organized teams of recovering Aquan workers to harvest the aquatic plants growing in the heated thermal pools, which proved to have excellent insulating properties when properly processed. These underwater plants had evolved to trap warm water around their root systems, creating natural thermal barriers that could be adapted for garment construction. Boulder's recovery took longer due to his crystalline physiology, but once his body temperature stabilized, he became an enthusiastic supporter of the jacket production effort. The Rockburn foreman organized teams of his people to collect specific crystal types that provided the best thermal reflection properties. His species' natural strength allowed them to harvest larger crystal sections that could be incorporated into specialized heating panels for the most severely affected workers. The Rockburn teams discovered that certain crystal formations possessed unique properties that varied based on their mineral composition and formation conditions. Some crystals provided excellent heat retention, others offered superior reflective capabilities, and a few rare varieties could actually generate small amounts of thermal energy when exposed to pressure. Boulder's geological expertise helped Tom understand how to combine these different crystal types for maximum thermal efficiency. Tom established a formal production hierarchy with specialized teams, handling different aspects of jacket construction. The humans continued to lead design and quality control, but alien workers contributed their unique abilities to various stages of the process. Chitauri workers used their multiple arms and compound eyes to perform precise assembly work, creating intricate thermal patterns that humans couldn't achieve alone. The Chitauri demonstrated particular skill in creating the complex layered designs needed for their own species' jackets. Their natural ability to work with multiple tools simultaneously allowed them to weave thermal mushroom fibers with plant materials while simultaneously placing crystal elements in precise thermal distribution patterns. Queen Zara, once she emerged from hibernation, provided detailed knowledge of Chitauri physiology that helped optimize jacket designs for maximum body heat retention. Lisa coordinated the expanded workshop operations from a converted cargo bay that provided space for multiple production lines. Each alien species worked on jackets designed for their own physiological needs while also contributing to general material preparation that benefited everyone. The workshop became a model of interspecies cooperation, with workers learning skills from each other and sharing techniques that improved overall production efficiency. The resource collection operations expanded beyond the original 3 material types as alien workers contributed knowledge of additional thermal management resources native to Taros 7. The Equine teams discovered thermal algae growing in deep pools that could be processed into flexible heating elements. The Rockburn found mineral deposits that, when ground into powder and mixed with plant fibers, created thermal paste that could seal jacket seams and prevent heat loss. Dave established quality control procedures that ensured each jacket met minimum thermal protection standards before distribution. The testing process involved thermal sensors, stress testing, and fit verification by members of the target species. Rejected jackets were recycled for materials or modified to meet specifications, ensuring that no resources were wasted in the desperate race against time. Mark organized the distribution network that prioritized the most critically affected workers while maintaining fair allocation across all species and work groups. The medical teams provided lists of workers in the most danger, while supervisors identified essential personnel whose recovery would help maintain critical facility operations. The distribution process became a complex logistics challenge that required constant adjustment as conditions changed. The success of the jacket program had an unexpected secondary effect on station morale. Workers who had been facing potential death from hypothermia found themselves not only surviving but actively contributing to saving their colleagues. The shared experience of crisis and cooperation broke down many of the species' barriers that had previously limited interaction between different alien groups. Tom watched Chitauri workers teaching Aquan colleagues how to weave thermal mushroom fibers while Rockburn teams shared crystal processing techniques with human engineers. The workshop buzzed with conversations in multiple languages as universal translators worked overtime to facilitate the exchange of ideas and techniques. Species that had previously worked in separate groups now collaborated seamlessly on shared survival goals. The production rate increased dramatically as more workers recovered and joined the manufacturing effort. What began as a single human's desperate experiment had evolved into a station-wide, cooperative effort that demonstrated the power of combining diverse skills and knowledge. Each species contributed their unique strengths while learning from the abilities of their colleagues. Emergency communication updates to the rescue ships revealed that the crisis had largely been resolved through local resources and ingenuity. The evacuation procedures were scaled back to routine personnel rotation, and the emergency medical supplies were redirected to other facilities facing different challenges. Taro 7 had become a success story rather than a disaster requiring outside intervention. The atmospheric processors remained offline, and the temperature continued below normal levels. But the mining station had adapted to the new conditions. Workers wore their thermal jackets as standard equipment, and production resumed at near normal levels despite the ongoing cold. The facility had proven that diverse crews could overcome environmental challenges through cooperation and creative problem-solving. Tom found himself regarded as a hero by workers from all species, though he insisted that the real achievement belonged to everyone who had contributed materials, manufacturing skills, and distribution efforts. The jackets represented not just thermal protection but also the power of combining human adaptability with alien knowledge and capabilities. As evening approached and the temperature dropped to its lowest point yet, Tom walked through the facility and saw alien workers going about their duties in their thermal jackets, comfortable and productive despite conditions that would have been fatal just days earlier. The crisis had transformed into an opportunity that brought the diverse crew closer together while demonstrating the unique value that each species brought to their shared endeavor. 3 weeks after the atmospheric processors finally restored normal temperatures to Taro 7, the Mining Consortium's board of directors arrived on an unscheduled inspection visit. Their transport ship had been diverted from a routine corporate tour to investigate reports of a potential disaster that had somehow resolved itself without requiring emergency evacuation or significant financial losses. Director Walsh, a stern human administrator known for his focus on profit margins and operational efficiency, stepped off the transport expecting to find evidence of management failures and costly emergency responses. Instead, he discovered a mining operation running at 103% of normal productivity levels, with interspecies cooperation indicators reaching the highest ratings in consortium history. The delegation included representatives from all 4 species' home governments, each prepared to investigate how their citizens had been protected during the environmental crisis. Director Scales from the Chitauri Industrial Council arrived with formal protocols for investigating potential negligence in worker safety. Administrator Current from the Aquan Trade Federation carried authorization to remove her people from any facility deemed unsafe for amphibious workers. Supervisor Iron from the Rockburn Mining Guild had brought geological survey equipment to assess whether Taro 7 remained suitable for his people's continued employment. The unexpected reports of successful crisis management had confused the oversight boards, who were more accustomed to investigating failures than understanding successes. Tom met the inspection team at the landing platform, wearing one of the thermal jackets that had become standard equipment for all workers regardless of species. The garment looked professionally manufactured despite its origins in desperate experimentation with local materials. Director Walsh examined the jacket with interest, noting its sophisticated design and obvious effectiveness. The tour began in the production facility that had evolved from Tom's original storage room workshop. Lisa demonstrated the manufacturing process using materials harvested from Taro 7's natural thermal management systems, while Dave explained the quality control procedures that ensured each jacket met species-specific thermal protection requirements. The directors observed alien workers from different species collaborating seamlessly on jacket production, sharing techniques and knowledge across traditional species boundaries. Queen Zara greeted the Chitauri representative with formal protocols that included unprecedented praise for interspecies cooperation. She presented Tom with a crystalline medal that had been grown specifically for the occasion, using techniques that required months of careful cultivation. The honor was typically reserved for individuals who saved entire Chitauri colonies from destruction, and its presentation to a human represented a significant diplomatic recognition. Ripple addressed the Aquan administrator while wearing her custom-fitted thermal jacket, her skin showing the healthy blue-green coloration that indicated optimal physiological function. She explained how the human-designed garments had saved dozens of Aquan lives and allowed her people to continue working in conditions that would normally require evacuation to warmer climates. Her presentation included detailed thermal efficiency data that impressed the technically minded Aquan officials. Boulder's presentation to the Rockburn supervisor involved harmonic communication that resonated through the facility's structural framework, creating a complex musical composition that celebrated successful adaptation to environmental challenges. The Rockburn foreman presented Tom with a heat crystal extracted from deep within Taros 7's planetary core, a gift that represented the sharing of fundamental life energy between species. The inspection team toured the mining operations and observed alien workers performing their duties efficiently despite the continued cold temperatures. The thermal jackets allowed Chitauri workers to maintain full mobility and coordination in conditions that would previously have forced hibernation. Aquan personnel worked extended shifts without the cognitive impairment that cold had previously caused. Rockburn teams operated heavy machinery with full structural integrity despite the challenging thermal environment. Director Walsh conducted private interviews with workers from all species, expecting to uncover complaints about working conditions or demands for additional compensation related to the environmental crisis. Instead, he found universal praise for the cooperative response that had turned potential disaster into an example of successful adaptation. Workers described feeling more valued and included in facility operations than before the crisis occurred. The human workers received particular recognition for their leadership during the emergency, but they consistently redirected credit to their alien colleagues who had contributed essential knowledge and labor to the jacket production effort. Tom's interviews emphasized that the success had required combining human adaptability with alien expertise in ways that created solutions none of the species could have achieved independently. The formal evaluation report praised the Taros 7 facility as a model for multi-species cooperation under adverse conditions. The jacket design was forwarded to the consortium's research division for analysis and potential adoption across other mining operations. The manufacturing techniques developed during the crisis were documented for use in similar emergency situations. On other worlds, 3 months later, Tom received notification that the thermal jacket design had been refined and standardized for use across 12 different mining worlds operated by the consortium. The original desperate experiment with local materials had evolved into standard safety equipment that protected alien workers in challenging environments throughout the galaxy. The design patents were registered in Tom's name with royalty payments. That would provide financial security for the rest of his career. More importantly, the Taros 7 facility became a preferred assignment for workers from all species who wanted to experience the cooperative atmosphere that had developed during the crisis. The mining station's reputation for successful interspecies collaboration attracted the best workers from across the consortium's operations, creating a feedback loop of excellence that benefited everyone involved. Tom continued working on Taros 7 as the senior engineer responsible for environmental adaptation systems. His duties expanded to include training other human personnel in crisis response techniques and interspecies cooperation methods. The consortium established a training program based on the Taros 7 experience, teaching workers how to recognize and utilize local resources for solving unexpected challenges. The atmospheric processors were eventually repaired and upgraded to prevent similar malfunctions, but the thermal jackets remained standard equipment for all facility personnel. The garments served as both practical safety equipment and symbolic reminders of what could be achieved when diverse species worked together toward common survival goals. Years later, When new crises arose on other worlds, the phrase "pull a Taro 7" became common terminology throughout the consortium for solving problems. Through creative use of local resources and interspecies cooperation, Tom's name became associated with human adaptability and the species' unique ability to find solutions that helped others survive and thrive in challenging environments. Standing on the observation deck during his final week on Taro 7 before promotion to a senior position at Consortium headquarters, Tom watched alien workers from 4 different species collaborating on mining operations, while wearing the thermal protection that had saved their lives. The crisis that could have destroyed the facility had instead created something stronger and more valuable than anyone had imagined possible.